RAF Leeming in Yorkshire nowadays is a busy training base, but in 1944 it was a base for bombers. The D-Day landings took place on the 6th of June 1944, and on the night of the 7th of June at 11:15, Halifax bomber LW-128, named by the crew the Impatient Virgin, took off from here. They were going to bomb the railway yards at Achere near Paris in France, part of a 337 strong bomber force to bomb various lines of communication behind the Normandy landings. 4 of the 7 crew didn't make it back here. Here's the story. Of the 7 who set out that night, only 3 would make it back safely. Pilot William Anderson, unfortunately not. Bomb aimer Leonard O'Leary, again he wasn't going to come back. Navigator Anthony Capuston, no, he wasn't going to come back either. Flight engineer Gilbert Steer, he made it back okay. Mid-upper gunner John Mangione, he also made it back. Wireless operator John Banning, he wasn't going to come home either. Rear gunner Gordon Ritchie, he made it back okay. So what happened? On the 7th of June 1944, one day after the Normandy landings, Halifax bomber LW-128 took off from Leeming airfield in Yorkshire. Now, it was being flown by a crew of Canadian pilots from 429 Squadron, and they were tasked with bombing the railway yards at Achere, just on the northwest of Paris. They were trying to cut the lines of communication that the Germans had behind the Normandy beachhead. Now, they took off at 11:15 at night. Now, when they got over Dieppe, the aircraft was hit by flak, and some shrapnel from the flak entered the aircraft and went across the stomach of the pilot William Anderson, causing him to bleed profusely, and he slumped down onto the control column, and the aircraft entered a dive. The pilot immediately gave the order to bail out of the aircraft, and 3 of the crew did do. Tony Capuston, John Banning and Leonard O'Leary immediately bailed out of the aircraft. Now, the flight engineer, Gilbert Steer, he went up to attend to Anderson, the pilot, but he was bleeding everywhere and Steer could hardly stand up. The blood was all over the floor, he was struggling to walk, and he managed to get the aircraft out of the dive and back level. Now, Steer had never flown an aircraft before. He was a flight engineer, so apart from having his hands on a dual aircraft, he'd never actually flown an aircraft before, so he didn't really know what he was doing. However, the two gunners, the upper gunner and the rear gunner, also came up to the front of the aircraft, and they helped him manhandle Anderson, because he was a big bloke. They helped him manhandle him out and towards the rear of the aircraft where there was an escape hatch. So flight engineer Spear jumped into the cockpit and he took over, and he thought, I can get this back to England. So at this point, there's 7 of the 7 crew, there's 4 left on board the aircraft. There's the pilot, the flight engineer, and 2 gunners, the mid-upper gunner and the rear gunner. So they decide to give Anderson his best chance to strap a parachute to him and manhandle him, because he's bleeding so much, to manhandle him over to the escape hatch and drop him on the parachute on a static line down, so that the Germans can pick him up and give him the necessary medical attention. Now, by the time that they've managed to get Anderson to the rear of the aircraft, they're back over the coast of England, and they try and contact people, airfields, to tell them what they're doing and where they are, and that they're going to drop Anderson. Now, they get over near an airfield in Oxfordshire, and they get within radio contact, and the flight engineer says that he'd like to land, but he's never done it before. So they tell him, no way can you even attempt to land that aircraft. Says you've got to take it out over towards the sea and everyone bail out and ditch it. So at this point they drop the pilot William Anderson out on a static line, and he is alive when he hits the ground, but unfortunately he dies before any medical attention can get to him. Now, by this time it's after 3 o'clock in the morning, and they take the aircraft out away from the airfield, and the 3 remaining people on board, that's the flight engineer and the 2 gunners, the mid-upper gunner and the rear gunner, they ditch the aircraft, and the aircraft crashes at 3:20 in the morning, disintegrates and burns. Now, what became of the 3 people who bailed out? Now, John Banning and Leonard O'Leary, they were both taken prisoner of war, and they spent the rest of the war in Stalag Luft 7 in Upper Silesia, which is now Poland. Anthony Kapustin, he evaded, and he managed to make it back to England without being taken a prisoner. So that is the remarkable story of what happened on board LW-128 that fateful night, the day after the D-Day landings. I'm just starting off making these videos, and if you like the sort of content that I'm doing, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could subscribe to give me some support. Thank you.
Radio Bob.
I'm not lined up yet. Roswell traffic, final runway 02.
Okay.
Lovely.
Make sure I get over them trees.
Lead it off, that's
Power on till I get over them trees.